delay. The title of my project is Child-Centered Schooling Appealing to Different Learning Types in the 21st Century. So to get you guys introduced to the topic and to reveal kind of why I'm interested in it, I want to start out with a little background story. So the summer before my sophomore year of high school, I was talking to my mom because I knew I was going to be taking chemistry, and she was so excited. She said, "Honey, I'm so excited you're taking chemistry. Your grandmother was a chemist. I almost majored in chemistry, and you love math. It's going to be great." I hated chemistry. I dreaded walking in the room every morning, first period. I would just be staring blankly at the periodic table, at the board. I hated chemistry. The reason for me hating chemistry, I realized, was because I'm a kinesthetic learner, meaning that I learn with my hands, and almost everything we did in chemistry class was not involved in that. After receiving yet another poor grade on my quiz, I met with my teacher, Ms. Rockman, and discussed with her my problem. Instead of turning me down like most teachers in the past, she, within a week, had bought me a periodic table puzzle and building molecules so that I could build stuff with my hands and use my hands to learn. She kept it in a box with my name on it in the classroom. I ended up getting an A in chemistry both semesters my 10th grade year, and I really have to say it's all thanks to Ms. Brockman. Unfortunately, the story is the exception, not the rule, and that is the reason why I wanted to research my current topic. So, I'm going to kind of introduce you to the three main things I studied this past 3 months. So, the first thing is I want to introduce you into what exactly are the three learning types and how can they be used in action. We'll then talk about what is the current problem in the U.S. education system with these learning types. And finally, how can we attempt to fix this problem in the United States? So let's get started. What are the three learning types? So there's a pretty simple acronym called VAC. So visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. So seeing, hearing, and using your hands to learn. So these are the three learning types. And how can they be used in action? So this past summer, I worked at a program called Breakthrough Collaborative. These are some of the pictures from the program. It's a summer school program for underprivileged but motivated students to help them get into college. And during the summer, they take summer school classes with teachers like myself. At Breakthrough, they take differential learning very seriously, and I spent a week learning how to implement this in my classroom. So what I want to do today to give you guys a better understanding of how this would work in the classroom is to give you guys a little example from my 7th grade algebra class this past summer. This picture is in fact with my creative writing class, but just to give you an idea of some of the kids. So for 7th grade algebra, we were learning fractions. So for the visual learner, I put stuff on the board so that students could see fractions, write them down, and better understand things that way. For the auditory learner, I did something a little different. I did a partner exercise in which students had note cards with a fraction on them and would walk around with their fellow classmates talking about their fractions and adding them together. For example. Hi Rachel, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. What does your fraction say?
It says 1/4.
Mine says 1/4 too. So if I have 1/4 and you have 1/4, we have a half, right?
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Rachel. All right, break. So this is an example of the auditory learning. So Rachel and I were able to talk to each other about these fractions and communicate, okay, I have this and you have that. So what does that mean? So for the auditory learner, they learn best by speaking to each other and speaking out loud and hearing things. And so for this, the auditory learners really understood fractions better. And finally, for the kinesthetic learner, I printed out a bunch of pizzas for each student in my class, paper pizzas, and cut them into slices. Each time they added or took away a slice, they had to tell me how many fractions or how much of a fraction they had left. So I found these methods extremely useful in my classroom. And ideally, this would be used in all classrooms across the country, K through 12, to learn fractions or really any other topics in school. Unfortunately, this is really not possible in reality. My breakthrough classes were capped at 8 students. United States Public School, on average, have about 30 students in the K through 12 setting, and therefore it'd be very hard to use these methods in the public school classroom. So that brings me to the second part, the current problem, that these aren't being used in the classroom. A shocking 15% of students in the K through 12 environment learn kinesthetically. If you take that into account in this classroom, that would mean that Rachel, Maggie, and a quarter of Cole learn kinesthetically. Work with me here. So, therefore, I personally would not want to forget about Rachel, Maggie, and a little bit of Cole. But unfortunately, that's what's currently happening in the system, and that is not okay. What these students have to do is they spend their time molding their minds to learn in a way that they were not scientifically intended to, and this takes up a lot of their time instead of the time they could be spending learning well. And this kind of brought me to one of my research, even though this is the case, some students still manage to do well in this environment. Like myself, I still managed to do pretty well in school despite my kinesthetic learning abilities. So this brought me to one of my main research questions, which is what if these kinesthetic learners that are strong K-12 students had been appealed to in the K-12 setting? And then the follow-up question, how great could they have done then? And these two questions brought me to the final part of my research, most important part. How can we attempt to fix this problem in the United States? How can we attempt to appeal to these kinesthetic and auditory and visual learners in a proper way? The first option I explored was the idea of teacher training. Essentially what this means is that teachers would be trained to implement the 3 different learning types in their classrooms through a variety of activities. Essentially what I learned to do this past summer at Breakthrough. Like I already mentioned, this idea is not really a reality because of the fact that classrooms in the United States are filled with far too many students to be able to do this. So realistically, teacher training, maybe not the best idea. The second thing that I thought of was the idea of separate classrooms. But this is something that I actually came up with myself. This is an idea that students would be separated into the classrooms based on their learning type. So essentially, kinesthetic learners would be in the classroom with kinesthetic learners, and the teacher would be only gearing towards those kinesthetic learners. Like I mentioned, this is something that I came up with, so I couldn't really conduct any research on whether or not this is a plausible idea. And so for right now, separate classrooms, probably not the best idea. This brought me to technology. As Hassan mentioned in his presentation on blended learning, this is something that's very emergent in the current society. And how this would work is that programs would be on the computer and would allow students to do assignments that are geared towards their specific learning type. So if you're doing chemistry, for kinesthetic learners, they could place the different elements in the periodic table around using their mouse, for example. This would also be a good way because the classroom environment would not be disturbed. This would be something that's exterior from the classroom and because it would be individually based. So in conclusion, my 10th grade chemistry class was amazing for me, but unfortunately it's not reality for most students in America. Therefore, it is extremely important that we do recognize that there are 3 different learning types, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, and that currently these learning types are not being taught towards in the current U.S. education system, and this is not okay. Therefore, that is why I propose that we piggyback on the booming and technology movement and implement differential learning through technology to better support all of our K-12 students. Thank you.
Thank you.